when you run a software business, your margins tend to be very high.
Mm-hmm.
And we were able to afford that. Even with a video creation tool, which does have some high cost, we were able to still be profitable. I think we could have probably discounted up to like 70 or 80% and maybe still eked out a tiny profit. But 50% was what we found to be a nice balance between what people were attracted to and what we are willing to forego in the short term to keep those customers that we valued.
Hey everyone, in today's episode, I had a chance to talk to Nick Fogle. He is the founder of Churnkey, and Nick is no stranger to adversity. He overcame immense student loan debt, learned an entirely new trade, founded a startup, and sold it for 7 figures. Using everything he learned from that experience, he founded Churnkey in the hopes that he can help other businesses save money by increasing their retention. Churnkey is a service that focuses on reducing your company's churn rate in order to save you money and time that could be focused elsewhere. Nick believes that just because you are the CEO doesn't mean that you have to do everything yourself. Proper leadership is found through delegation. All right, Nick, thank you for being with me here today. How's everything? How is it going?
It's going great.
How's life in South Carolina?
It's turning fall here, which means it's the best time of the year. It's not hot anymore. It's like 70,
Is
80
it
degrees
really the
most
best time
days,
of the
sunny.
year?
The fall is the best time of the year in Charleston. Yeah, I think honestly, like October, November are the best time. It's the best time of year, and the tourists have left mostly for the year, so it's not quite as crowded. It's a good time.
Well, fall is definitely better than winter, so I will choose fall over winter anytime. So, Nick, you've been in business for so long. I mean, I don't even know, how many years, but I know you've had like multiple businesses. So tell me about your entrepreneurial journey. What was your first business? And then what is your current business now and what do you do?
So way back in 2000, we'll start in 2008 and I'll try to give you the fast version. I was an economics undergrad and I had these interviews with the big banks. I was out at dinner with Bank of America as one of their potential candidates to be hired. I was ambitious. I was graduating a semester early. And that night on TV, I was watching the news and Lehman collapsed and a number of these other investment banks collapsed. And the next morning I woke up with an email from Bank of America. They'd freeze their hiring process. So I said, okay, well, what's next? I said, I've taken the LSAT. Maybe I'll go to law school. So I was like, that sounds fun. Lawyers make a lot of money, right? So I went to law school. In the process of going to law school, I racked up a lot of debt. I ended up not really enjoying the practice of law in 2012 when I got out of law school. And I realized attorneys don't have a lot of room for creativity and some of the things that were passions of mine. And while running a law firm that's running a business, I didn't want to run that kind of business. I wanted a business that gave me a little bit more autonomy and more room for creativity. And I had this startup idea. If you work in law, there are lots of areas that are very antiquated and there hasn't been a lot of innovation there. And I have all these cool business ideas. I said, you know what? I'm going to do something crazy and step away from law. I have this tremendous debt, but I'm not actually making much. I wouldn't make much at all as an attorney down in Charleston. The pay is frankly not that great. So I was like, I'm going to start a business. So I ended up driving a shuttle bus for 6 months and teaching myself to code to build this first business. It was called See the Law. That was the name of the business. Dumb. I think it was kind of looking back, it seems dumb. But the idea was that law is very hard for laymen to comprehend. So the idea was taking visualizations and graphics and making law very easy for laymen to understand. The problem with this ambitious venture was I didn't know how to code. And as a naive startup founder, nobody was going to just do it for equity. Like I couldn't find a software engineer or developer to just say, hey, I'll do this for 20% of your company, give away thousands of hours of time. So I had to teach myself to code. And while I was out driving the shuttle bus and kind of bemoaning my life, I taught myself to code. And it turned out that learning to code was initially a means to an end to build this business. The business was too ambitious. I was not equipped to build everything I needed to build to get this thing off the ground, but I actually loved coding and I got an internship at a software company here in Charleston. And I just worked really hard over 3, 4, 5 years to kind of work my way out of going from zero coding knowledge to being pretty much an expert in what I did. And I still wanted to build businesses. So in 2015, we had a business idea. It was audio, like kind of like making a Reddit for audio. So again, very naive, me and this other guy, we were creating it. And we spent 2 years and a lot of money, a lot of time, and that business, we could never get it off the ground. We tried to raise venture money. We could not raise venture money as two unproven founders with just, an idea and a decent little product. And we were about to shut everything down. And it's kind of a Hail Mary effort, I actually created a tool for podcasters. So one thing we realized about audio is it does not share well on social media. Back then, we're in 2015 at this point, and back in 2015, if you tried to share an audio clip to social, it would just be like an audio bar, like just a really simple interface. Nobody would click it. Nobody would engage with it.
It's kind of boring.
And very boring. Nobody, it's not going to generate any interest at all. So what I created was this tool that allowed you to drop a audio snippet into something that would turn that into a video. It would use your graphic, if you had like any artwork as the background, and it would create an animated waveform. And initially we were just using that to promote this failed startup that we were working on, like clips from within the community. And people were like, I don't really care about your community there, but I really want this tool that you're using. How are you making these videos? And that was the light bulb moment where we were like, maybe we can charge people for this. So at first it was just a handful of podcasters that were paying us like $7 a month. Can't build a business like that, obviously. But over time we scaled this, and the product shared, it had a viral loop building because we'd put a little Wavve, Wavve was the company, little watermark in the bottom corner. People would see that, and then they'd go to Wavve and they'd sign up for an account. And
that was your company, Wavve?
Wavve is the company, yeah.
I was using that. So you sold that company to somebody?
Yes, we sold it in 2021. And it was a long journey to build that company because, it came out of this failed startup, and it started as such a humble little tool that looked horrible at first, but that is the key to finding a business opportunity. Is if the product doesn't look good, but people are still willing to pay you money to use it, you're solving a real pain point. And there was nothing else like this on the market. So over time we grew it, we invested more time in the product, and we scaled that to when we sold it, we had 120,000 total users.
Wow.
Over the course of running that business, we had 20,000 total paying subscribers.
I was probably a user during 2021.
I bet you were. I would not be surprised at all.
Yeah.
When you look at the total number of podcasts that are out there, we had most of the podcasters using Wavve at one point or another, be it on the free tier or on the paid tier.
Yeah.
So it's cool when I hop on podcasts like this, and I can surprise hosts to be like, you probably use my product. But it took 4 years to get it to a point where it was growing, it was very profitable, and it was in a position where we could sell that business.
So this was the business that you bootstrap. This was the one that you were talking to me about, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Before we started recording, we were, talking a little bit about this hypothetical, business sale. Well, that was Wavve. We sold Wavve in March of 2021.
I was like, if you can see like my jaw right now, I was like jaw drop, like, oh wait, but okay, what made you sell the company?
Oh, that's a tough one. So I had a lot of student loan debt. So if we rewind, and this is another, shocking stat that people are surprised by, but at one point I had $250,000 in student loan debt. And a lot of that was because I took out graduate loans that had a very high interest rate, and I paid the minimum payment the government required me to make. But when you do that, the balance increases over time, even though you're making payments. So my law school loans went from $165,000 to almost $250,000 when I started really chipping away at the balance in 2017. That ties into this decision to sell Wavve. So personally, 99% of my net worth was tied up in Wavve itself. And I knew that, at any given moment, we could get sued, any horrible thing could happen and that could get wiped out. So for myself, my family, we just had a kid, and my wife was pregnant with another little boy. And the timing was right. We were also at a position where we'd been in the audio space for a long time, and we had other little creative projects that we were thinking of pursuing. And we were like, maybe we need to find a new home for Wavve and find people that are more operationally focused that want to take it to the next level. So that was during the pandemic. We grew a lot, but we were thinking about this in the back of our mind. The really relevant part of this story, I guess, for what I'm doing now is as we were thinking about selling Wavve, we had a problem. We talked to a number of these business brokers. There are brokers out there that once your business grows, they have databases. They know roughly how large you are, and they'll reach out to you. And we had conversations with them about, selling Wavve, and they'd go through our numbers and they'd say, yeah, that looks good. That looks good. Uh-oh, you guys have 13% churn. So 13% of our users would leave every month. And when you have churn at that percent, it may not sound too bad, but you basically have to replace your entire customer base every year if you're churning out 13% of your users per month. So we spent like 30,000.
How many is 13%? If you can still remember.
Yeah.
Like, even just an estimate.
I mean, I think there were months where we were losing like 700 paying customers. And
did you guys, were you guys able to like find the reasoning for that?
Yeah. So we paid this churn consultancy $30,000 to come in and like, I was thinking we could just pay them and they'd fix it for us, solve it. But business doesn't really work like that. I think a lot of operators think like, all right, I'll find the foremost expert in the field and they'll just like solve the problem for me if I throw enough money at them. And we can just focus on building the product, making it better, making the videos better. But that didn't really work. And the business brokers were like, if you guys really want to sell this for what you think it's worth, you need to solve this churn problem and get it down from like 13% to below 10%, which is, that's a big difference. Even though it's a few percentage points, it makes a huge difference in the ability for the business to grow and not just like plateau off at a point. So we spent a good 6 months to a year. After that consulting arrangement didn't really pan out, we started building a tool internally that would figure out why are people leaving with a little survey when they go to cancel. And then we realized, okay, well, people are canceling. Maybe there's a reason that we could help them stay based on the cancellation reason. With podcasting, one thing that would happen is people have seasons of podcasts. They would use the product for 3 months and then they'd go, on a break and they'd cancel. And, our concern is like, okay, well, maybe they'll go to a competitor when they leave, or maybe they'll just like forget about Wavve and they won't use it again. So we started offering the ability to pause for 2 or 3 months. And that like started retaining a ton of users. This was also during COVID where people were like very freaked out and worried about cost. And they started slashing their budgets, just being more price sensitive. And we realized if we gave people who said it doesn't fit my budget, if we offered a 50% discount for a few months, that could retain a lot of users. The customers would be happy and we'd be happy because we're retaining some of that. So we experimented with a number of these offers at the point of cancellation that worked really well to retain these customers. And eventually we got our churn rate down to below 10%.
But profit wise, was it like the best decision to offer 50% off? Okay.
It was, because if you think about it, when you run a software business, your margins tend to be very high.
Mm-hmm.
And we were able to afford that. Even with a video creation tool, which does have some high cost, we were able to still be profitable. I think we could have probably discounted up to like 70 or 80% and maybe still eked out a tiny profit, but 50% was what we found to be a nice balance between what people were attracted to and what we are willing to forego in the short term to keep those customers that we valued. It was like the business was much more profitable from doing this. Our churn rate wasn't as bad, and we were able to probably add a good 7 figures to that the acquisition price by doing this. And when that sale came, we were like, well, what are we going to do next? We had other startup founders and business operators we knew, and we'd share this story. And they said, I need that tool. Like, could you help me build it myself? We spent like 6 months, maybe a year building this internally. It took us away from like our core product vision that we were building on. And we were like, why would all these people have to build this themselves? Why don't we build this and let other businesses just take advantage of this as its own product? So we started a business called Churnkey as soon as we sold Wavve. And that's what we're running today. We've been running Churnkey for about 18 months. And we have customers on Churnkey that are saving, they're boosting their revenue, like otherwise revenue they would have lost, by hundreds of thousands of dollars per month. It's incredible.
Yeah, that's awesome. And is Churnkey like a platform? Did you build a software, or is this like a service-based business?
It is totally automated software.
Okay.
And I know there's another one called Gravy that we were familiar with, and Gravy works that it's more of a service, and that's for very high dollar value accounts where you can actually have somebody sitting in a call center like call people and try to like recoup failed payments, things like that.
Right. Yeah.
But for like lower cost subscriptions that are below $100 a month, you can't make the unit economics work. So these businesses need some kind of automation.
That's true. Yeah. And nowadays, it's either you eliminate, you delegate, or you automate. You got to do those
Mhm.
three. So what are the things that you've learned from running Wavve, in 2015, from 2015 to 2021, if I'm not mistaken? But what are
Mhm.
the things that you've learned from building Wavve and making it successful to now to now your new business, Churnkey?
Yeah, a lot of mistakes initially. One of the biggest mistakes that I tell other aspiring founders and entrepreneurs is it's important to start. If you have a business idea and something that you want to try, just start, but you need to validate the market. You don't want to adopt this mindset of, I just need to build it and build it really well, and then people will come use my product. It's actually the opposite. That's what we learned with Wavve. We built this like monstrosity of a product that was super cool. It was the product that we would want to use. People weren't willing to pay for that. But then we built this like very rudimentary tool that there was a desperate need for it. That worked really well. So when I talk to other founders, I just say, just start and create the most basic version of something you can and see if people are willing to pay for that.
Mm-hmm.
Other lessons we learned through growing and scaling Wavve, I think in hindsight, if I were to do it over, I think we would have started delegating and outsourcing things earlier. We waited forever to get a customer support person. Part of that was just some risk aversion since we were bootstrapping this business.
Right. Yeah.
We knew that every dollar of profit could potentially come back to our pockets. And I had, tremendous debt, and I was like, yeah, let's just make it as profitable as possible. We'll work 60 hours a week. And I think the business probably suffered from that because we didn't outsource enough earlier. Once we got the customer support person, it was like, oh, wow, our quality of life increased dramatically. And then we hired somebody to do all of our SEO and content marketing. And my co-founder, who was doing most of that work, Baird, he was like, his quality of life really took off once a lot of that manual work could be offloaded to this, it's more of an agency, I guess, where there were 3 different people that could handle a lot of these tasks. So over time, we just kind of scaled up, but we waited a long time to really, before we really started doing these things. Another area where I think we could have benefited is if we had been more aggressive outsourcing engineering and build out more features. There was a competitor company that came up maybe 2 years after we created Wavve. It's called Veed, Veed.
.io.
.io. Yeah.
I'm using that right now, actually, for subtitles.
It's a massive company now. They raised like $30 million from Sequoia, which is like a preeminent fund. And we were like watching them when they were barely doing any revenue. And we saw they were building all these tools. And at the time, we thought about it, like, should we build this like Adobe Light type of editor? And we opted not to because of like, we had a core market, we'd identified it. And I think earlier, like we could have probably taken more risks. But that's a lesson we learned. I don't have any major regrets because we had a great outcome. But when you're looking at things and saying, okay, how would we do this differently? Well, maybe the biggest thing is looking back, there were a lot of things once we had the cash flow coming in that we could outsource and potentially grown that business to be much larger.
Right. True. And once you've sold your company, you cannot recreate that company, right? It's part of the contract, as far as I know.
Yeah, and that was a big thing too. We were basically like, and we had the acquirers. It was a group called Calm Fund, and or Calm Capital, sorry. Calm
Concap,
Fund is
yeah.
like another one that they actually like, they popped up later, and it creates some confusion in the market. But they are local. They were in North Carolina. We were in South Carolina. We love that. They had a very hands-on approach, and it was a great fit. And they had the operational focus that we thought the business needed. And when you go through that, though, the part of the deal is like, okay, well, we're going to change industries. We're not going after this podcast market, because then you would have, potential competition. And also part of the reason we were changing course and selling it was because we were ready to try something new, a different market, a different type of product.
Are you sick and tired of being overwhelmed and afraid you'll never scale your business? Meet Smart VAs. Unlike many virtual assistant agencies that only assign one dedicated virtual assistant, we provide flexibility for growing businesses by assigning a team of experienced virtual assistants that can do different tasks to support your continuous growth. Visit smartvas.online to book a free discovery call and start growing your business.
So now that you are kind of like focusing on your new business, are you planning on, do you have a vision to like sell this business after a couple of years and then venture onto something new again? Because us entrepreneurs, we're kind of like, you've been mentioning the word ambitious like maybe 5 times at the at the onset of this episode, at the when at the beginning of this interview. So I was like, okay, I have the word ambitious on my notes, and I was like, I'm also ambitious. I consider myself ambitious. I grew up from the Philippines, and we didn't have much in the Philippines. And now that I'm here in the States, I want to make the most out of it. I have the connections that I needed, that I didn't have when I was in the Philippines. So I feel like it's just normal for a serial entrepreneur to like build a business, after a while sell it, and build another business, and then sell it again. So what's your vision now for your current business?
Yeah, that's a great question, and one that I am still wrestling with. I probably don't really identify as a serial entrepreneur. I like to build new things. And I mean, there are definitely people that are, at any given time, they're working on like 2 or 3 different businesses.
Yeah.
That's not really me. I do like to kind of like find one thing to like hyper focus on for a while. And one thing I realized about selling Wavve, after you sell a business, you get this lump sum of cash in your bank account. And, then you have to worry about, okay, well, inflation's really high, stock market's really bad. You have this tremendous burden to like be a good steward of, this nest egg you have.
Right.
And that introduces stress. And you're like, okay, well, in some regards, it was less stressful to have a business that you could control your income on, and you have free cash flows that are continually kicked off. So as I think about Churnkey, it's kind of like, I don't have any short-term aspirations to sell it. I mean, maybe in 5 or 10 years, like that could be an option that's on the table again. But we're growing by 15 to 20% a month. And it brings us a lot of joy to work with other businesses and founders. I think that's kind of, you talk about, you hear people talk about founder market fit when it comes to startups and entrepreneurship. And that's that relation between what your product does and who you are. Right. And Wavve was something that I loved podcasts. I was probably more of like an end user, like listener podcast, but I didn't identify as much with host because I'd never run a podcast. But with this business, like I've run a business before. I know what those pain points are and the struggles are. I can really identify with the plight of a founder who has high churn. And right now, tons of founders have high churn because, we're entering into a global recession and people are very price sensitive. So it brings me great joy to jump on these sales calls, show what we do. And then when we see the amount of churn reduction they have and the amount of revenue they're saving, it's just like a very satisfying type of feeling. And I don't have any near-term interest in stepping away from it.
That's probably like a quote-unquote stupid question of mine. Why did I even ask that?
No, it's actually like we've already had people approach us about an acquisition. So that's why, that's why I don't necessarily have a great answer to that.
It's all right.
There have been a few conversations that I've actually, like real business conversations, where I've had to think hard and say, what is my vision for this business? And what would be, and everybody's got a number. Somebody, like a big, Amex or Visa or, a big giant could come and say, hey, here's $100 million for Churnkey. That's a pretty easy decision, but there's not like a, easy to calculate number in my head for what I would part with.
That's true. Yeah. So based on your experience so far, with Churnkey, with your current company, what do you think is the most common reason as to why businesses have high churn rate?
Well, there are a few. The one that we can actually help with the most is when people, particularly for B2C businesses, like consumer-centric subscription businesses, or like prosumer style businesses, like for, subscriptions for podcasters, where the usage is seasonal. That's one where like people are leaving because they're not using it and they have a temporary lapse in using the product. But the biggest one right now that we're seeing across the board is price sensitivity. People are just being like very scrutinizing of where's my money going each month. Inflation's high. There's a lot of uncertainty in the future, and therefore churn is very high. So if we can help businesses to discover a better position with price sensitivity and find a discount or some kind of offer that can entice people to stay, that is where we're going to make the biggest difference.
Yeah, that's awesome. And as for business to business, why do you think they have like high attrition rate?
So you're saying for B2B companies?
Yeah, business to business. Yeah.
So B2B is, I'd say, their retention is actually a good bit higher. And some of that is just due to the inertia of signing up. If you're a business and you're signing up for a subscription product, oftentimes that has to go through like a committee, and there are a lot of stakeholders that have signed off on that. And then it's the same thing when a business is going to cancel. Typically that has to go through a committee and they're like, okay, we're not going to use this right now. We need to cancel it. And at that point, their cancellation intent is much stronger than a consumer who may be deciding to cancel on a whim.
Mm-hmm.
That said, there are businesses that we have a number of Churnkey customers who are B2B businesses, and there are reasons why people cancel that we can actually retain. And in those, it's very interesting because these are high dollar amount accounts. And when there's a reason that we can kind of zero in on for why people are leaving, it can be very impactful. I had a business the other day, and one of the issues we were noticing, they had a lot of people who were saying that they were having technical issues with the product, or they weren't onboarded sufficiently. So after 2 or 3 months, these big accounts were leaving. And as we start to drill into some of the data that we can use with Churnkey to kind of like pick apart, we're able to help them better activate those customers. And they can use Churnkey to take actions within the account. So you can predict churn before it happens based on the actions that people are taking within the account. One other thing we do that helps B2B businesses is, I've talked a lot about this idea of voluntary churn. That's when somebody has this intent to leave and cancel. I haven't really talked about involuntary churn. And that's when somebody doesn't actually intend to leave. They don't have any plans to leave, but their payment fails. And that can happen for a number of reasons, card number changes, or they're using like one of these business accounts that has like a maximum amount they can charge a month on the card. Any number of reasons can cause a payment to fail. And we have another product that will kick off a series of emails, kind of like a recovery campaign. You've probably received these before. If you have a card that fails, and you get an email that says, hey, could you please update your card? So we have a number of techniques that we use to help recover failed payments, and that can save a lot of people's churn as well.
That's awesome. And can you like give us some practical ways on how a business owner or on how a business can reduce their churn rate?
Yeah. The first thing you have to do is you've got to understand why people are leaving. There are two, like I just mentioned, there are two components of this. Sometimes it's volitional, like there's a reason they're leaving and they're making a decision to cancel. So on one hand, you needed to understand like, okay, why are the bulk of these users choosing to cancel? And that other side is, okay, do I have a lot of failed payments? And what can I do to recover these failed payments? And it's key that you automate these things. If you're a business that has any sort of scale, it can be very expensive to hire people whose job that is to like, manually go back, and if somebody voluntarily cancels, then you've got to like have a whole reactivation campaign where you're reaching out, you're doing all these things, you're spending more money to like bring them back. It's far better to try to understand why they're leaving before they actually leave, and then try to offer them something to have them second guess that decision to leave. It's much cheaper to keep the customer you already have than go out and get another one.
That's so true, because you're going to spend on marketing again, talk to people, pay your salesperson to acquire a client. So it's like double of the cost that you're going to spend if you try to retain your current client. And so I totally agree with you that it's super important to understand why people are leaving. And in my agency, it's a practice of it's our practice to send like monthly surveys, like customer satisfaction survey to our clients. And we find that not all of them are gonna want to take the survey, because they're busy people. They're only gonna take the survey if they have complaints, if they have negative experience, right? And so one of the things that we're doing right now to kind of encourage them to take our survey is to enter them in a contest, where they can like win like a $50 or $100, every quarter if they participate in the survey. So do you have any thoughts on that? Like, what do you think is the best way to know why people are leaving? And is it wise to send them like monthly surveys?
Mhm. For an agency, I think that's brilliant. And if you're not doing it, you're going to lose more customers than you otherwise would have. I think part of it too, you have to like stay top of mind for customers. You want to make sure that like either you've already got a newsletter or something that is going out so that people are aware of like, okay, this is, something that, this thing I'm paying money for, they're at least educating me on the market or what's happening. And it also contributes to this idea of like, yeah, this is money well spent. It's kind of this winning team mentality where, I've got this agency in my corner and like they're constantly helping me learn more. And then the survey component you mentioned is also helpful. Even if you're having to spend, and with Wavve and other businesses, like we've actually just said, hey, if you do the survey, you automatically get $100 card. Wow. It can be hard to get that information from people, but what we've realized is the people that we actually want the information from, their time is the most scarce. So you really do need a good incentive to get them to give you feedback. If somebody has all the time in the world, it may not be a good reflection on the customers that you actually want.
That is so true. And speaking of, like, who do you target right now, for your current business for Churnkey? Like, do you target B2C or B2B?
Mostly B2C. Okay. And we do go after some B2B businesses, and we've had a good bit of success with B2B, but the pain it's most acute for B2C businesses. They really feel, and the volume is so much higher. Like they're seeing, we have some customers that are losing thousands of customers a month to voluntary churn. And if you can actually start saving, 500 customers, 1,000 customers, just with a simple automated tool, it totally changes that mindset for these businesses.
Yeah, that's true. And based on the experience that, you've had with Wavve, you mentioned that you wish you delegated sooner. And I assume that you are delegating now, in your current business. So what are the things that you are delegating, and how do you make sure that you set your team member up for success whenever you delegate a task to them?
I'm learning this, and it's hard. It's not my nature. I'm one of these people that, like my wife is a great delegator. She can delegate everything out. And I've struggled to let go of certain tasks. For instance, software development. With Wavve, I was like in the weeds all the time doing everything. We've brought on 2 extra software engineers to take on a lot of it. And I've got a CTO that manages them. At first, it can be like a little bit of, I don't know that it's an ego thing. It's more of a control thing. And I've realized that as a CEO and a founder, your job is to fire yourself from, one job after another. Like, you're constantly trying to replace yourself with somebody that can either do that better or that, where your time is spent better elsewhere. Content is another great one where previously we waited forever to get somebody to do the content for us. And you can spend a ton of time working on SEO and writing blog posts and stuff. That's another area where we've been able to pretty cost effectively outsource a lot of that work.
Yeah, cool. And even just writing a simple 2-paragraph caption can take you an hour if you're not in that mode, right? Of writing a caption for your social media post.
Yes. And it contributes to burnout. For me, I do really well with like long periods of high focused work, and context switching it's a recipe for me just getting totally tired and burnout if I'm jumping from task to task. Initially with Churnkey, I was doing sales, I was doing the legal, I was doing the finance, I was nights and weekends, I was like building things and also managing like our internal team, and was just feeling kind of miserable. It's like, I didn't feel like I was doing anything well. And that's been the biggest lesson for me is like, trust the people that you have on your team to do the job well. And, my job now is to find people that can do the job better than I could. You want to find people that are better than yourself at each of these different roles.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I feel like, what you've been through, the fear of letting go some of the tasks that you have, I feel like that's very normal, and especially with your experiences, because you studied economics, you studied law, you studied coding, it's like everything. So when it's something that you are really good at, it's something that sometimes we're afraid of letting go, or losing control, because we know that we're good at it and we feel like I'm the best and nobody's gonna can do this as best as me. So but I'm glad that you are now at that point where you're like learning how to delegate, because there's no if you really want to scale, there's no way but to delegate, because we can't do everything on our own, unless you want burnout, you want to die early. You want to die, you
Yeah.
want to
I
die
mean,
soon, right?
exactly. And I'm also like, I tend to be pretty cheap. And I think that comes from my, background of like having to be super scrappy and going through a lot of economic heartache. So I have this like aversion to spending on things. But what I've realized, it's like the more I spend on things, the better my quality of life is. So I'd rather like forego that income now to have a better quality of life and set the company up for more success than to penny pinch and, try to, juggle everything myself.
That's true. Yeah, well, this has been fun. As we wrap up, why don't you tell us about Churnkey? What you can do for your target audience, for my listeners, and where can people find you online?
Yeah, if you run a subscription business, we're the people that you want in your corner. We can take everything off your plate that is related to retaining your subscribers. And like I mentioned throughout this podcast, that includes people who click that dreaded cancel button, as well as people who don't actually intend to leave, but their subscription gets canceled because they have a payment that fails. And we also offer like a white glove service too. If you don't want to even think about churn, I know it can be very painful for a lot of business owners to like see a stream of never ending people that are leaving. It's the nature of a subscription business. You're always going to have people leaving. And in some cases, it can help for us to just say, hey, like, we'll take everything off your plate. We'll design the cancel flows. We'll manage this entire thing for you. And at the end of the day, you've got this really beautiful Churnkey dashboard, and you can just see the money coming in. It's kind of like, I call Churnkey a printing press for your business, because this is money that you're essentially leaving on the table if you don't have an automated solution like Churnkey already in place.
Yeah, and they can find you on churnkey.com or .co. Is it?
It's .co. We need to get the
.co.
.com.
Okay, churnkey.co. Yeah.
Wavve was a .co, and we never really felt like we needed a .com. And with Churnkey too, it's like it's been fine. We don't necessarily need the .com, but yeah, if you have any questions about Churnkey, you can just reach out to me. It's nick@churnkey.co. You can include that in the show notes as well. And I'll also say that if you're a listener and you have entrepreneurial aspirations or questions, or even if you're interested in whether Churnkey could help your business, you can DM me on Twitter. Sometimes that's easier for people if you have a Twitter account. My handle is just my name, Nick Fogle, Nickfogle. It's my handle on Twitter, and you can DM me. My DMs are open, and I'm generally pretty quick to try to get back to people.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Nick.